So, hi everyone. So, in our last class, we covered how we can change the user ID and group ID. So, if a process is getting executed, there should be an user who is executing that particular process. That ID of user who is executing the process, that is called as user ID. There can be three types of user ID, that is real user ID, effective user ID, and saved set user ID. We can change all these IDs with the help of a function called as setUID. So it works differently for normal user and for super user. For super user, it will change the real user ID, effective user ID, and saved set user ID to UID. Whereas for a normal user, it will only change the effective user ID to user UID. So if I want to change the real user ID as well as the effective user ID, then I can make use of this two particular function. So if I want to change only the effective user ID or effective group ID, then I can make use of this particular change functions. So this picture summarizes how we can change the user ID, the real user ID and effective user ID using different functions, which works for super user as well as for the normal user who does not have the necessary privileges. Then later on we saw interpreter file. What do you mean by an interpreter file? Inside that file we will be having a line. The first line contains a path. That path will point to the interpreter, so that if I am executing that particular file, there is no need to show the interpreter. No need to include the interpreter for executing that particular file. I can directly execute that particular file. Why I can directly execute that particular file? Because the interpreter itself is included in that particular file. Then later on we saw process accounting. This shows when a process gets terminated, we can maintain a record for each process which gets terminated. Inside that particular record, we can store the CPU time that has been utilized by that particular process, the user ID and group ID of that particular process, what is the starting time of that particular process. These are all the information we can maintain when a process gets terminated. This will be maintained for each particular process. So in this particular presentation session, we shall try to cover the remaining topics of first chapter of module 4, that is user identification. So whenever a process is getting executed, there are functions available in order to find the real user ID or effective user ID of that particular process. There are functions which are readily available to find the real user ID, effective user ID, real group ID, and effective group ID of that particular process. But if I want to find the login name of that particular user, who is the user who is currently running that particular process, if I want to find that login name, then I can call this particular function which is called as get pweid. But this particular function get pweid has some limitations. What are those limitations? That is, a single user can have multiple login names. A single user can have multiple login names, but the user ID remains the same. But user ID remains the same for that particular single user. So in this particular function, I'm trying to obtain the login name by passing the user ID. So the user ID remains same for all this multiple login name. Then I am not sure whether I will get the current login name for the current situation. You're getting my point, I think. So I'm passing an user ID. So a single user ID, a single user with the same user ID can have multiple login name. So when I obtain the login name, I am not sure I am obtaining the current login name. So this is not the correct way in order to obtain the login name of a particular user who is running the program. So in order to get this login name of the user who is currently running the program, your system will normally keep track of the name of the user who logs into the system, and that particular name can be obtained by using a function called as get login. So if I use this particular function, I will obtain the login name of the user who is currently logged into the program. So this is the function which can be called, which returns a pointer to a string which contains the login name. As you can see, it is returning a character pointer to a string which contains the login name. So if there is some error while executing this particular function, it will return null value. So this is how you can obtain the login name of a particular user who is currently running the program. There are limitations when you execute this particular function. This can be overcome by using a function called as get login. So the next topic is process times. What will process time hold? It holds three major time entities. So that means wall clock time, user CPU time, and system CPU time. First of all, we need to understand what are all these three different times is all about. Your user CPU time represents the amount of time your process got executed on your CPU. How much time your process spent while executing on the CPU? How much time your process spent while executing on the CPU? Your system CPU time represents how much time your process spent while executing with respect to operating system. That means your process needs to get the resource allocated. So your operating system will use some scheduling algorithm to allocate a process to a resource. At that particular point of time, your process will be with the operating system. The time spent by the process with the operating system is called a system CPU time. The time spent by the process with the CPU is called as user CPU time. And what is wall clock time? Before getting allocated to CPU, before getting allocated to any resources, there will be some time lapse, time elapsation. That time elapse is called as wall clock time. So if any process which is running, if it wants to obtain any of these three times for that particular process or for any terminated children, then it can call this particular function called as times. So as you can see, any process can call the times function to obtain these three values for itself or for any of its terminated children. If any children get terminated for a particular process, then that particular process can call this times function to obtain the values of these three times. So as you can see, the elapsed wall clock time in clock ticks if okay. So this will return the elapsed wall clock time. That means the wall clock time will be returned by for this particular function. So it will return 1 if there is some error. So we are passing a structure TMS. Inside the structure, it contains the user CPU time, the system CPU time, which I had explained just now. Then it also contains the user CPU time and system CPU time of the terminated children. So as you can see, you are not having a attribute called as wall clock time, but instead when you call this particular function itself, that value gets returned. That is what has been explained here. Note that the structure does not contain any measurement for the wall clock time. This is the elapsed time. That is, the process will wait for some time before getting the CPU allocated. That time is called as elapsed time. So this wall clock time has not been mentioned inside this particular structure. Instead, the function returns the wall clock time as the value of the function. It gets returned here itself each time it's get called. So this value will be measured from some arbitrary point in the past. So we can't get this absolute value. Instead, it is a relative value. That means how much time that has been elapsed by that particular process will be measured with respect to some relative point. It won't be absolute value. With respect to some relative point, you will be getting the time elapsed. You'll be getting the wall clock time. So these are all the three different types of times you can obtain when a process is getting executed. So your process can obtain these three times for its own use, and also it can obtain these three different times for the terminated children. So far we covered how we can obtain the login name of a particular user by using the get login function. Then we saw how we can obtain wall clock time, user CPU time, and system CPU time of a particular process calling a function called as times. So the last topic for this particular presentation session is process relationship. So in this we are going to understand terminal logging, how terminal logging will happen. So what are all the different functions which are available to invoke a terminal? Those are all the things we can cover in this particular topic. So whenever we will also look at the relationship between the login shell. What is a shell? It is a command interpreter. So your interaction with Unix operating system takes place through command. So there's different types of shell. So a shell should be kept on running. So when you log on to your Unix operating system. So we can also establish a relationship between the login shell that is invoked for us when we log in and all the processes that we start from our login shell. So the user will establish a connection between himself and a login shell. So then the user will start giving commands to the login shell. For each of the commands, the user starts giving, a process gets established, gets executed. So the relationship between the login shell and the processes, that also can be seen in this particular topic. So what is terminal? What do you mean by terminal logging? So terminals, there can be two types of terminal. That is one which is directly connected. That means if I'm using the system literally, I'm using my own CPU literally with my own screen, then it is called as local terminal. But if I'm using a terminal which is located somewhere else through remote login, then it can be called as remote login terminal. So in either case, these logins came through a terminal device driver in the kernel. That means for that terminal to run up or start up, there should be a terminal device driver in the kernel which makes sure the terminal gets started up. It might be local terminal or it might be the remote terminal. There is a terminal device driver in the kernel or the operating system which starts up that particular terminal. So how this process exactly will happen, that we can cover through this particular paragraph. As you can see, the system administrator creates a file called /etc/ttys terminals. So that has one line per terminal device. So there can be many number of terminals. For each of the terminals, a line will be printed. So this particular file contains many number of lines. Each line represents one terminal device. Each line specifies the name of the terminal device and other parameters that are passed to the Getty program. Why we need Getty program, that I will explain as we go through the paragraph. So one parameter is baud rate of the terminal. For example, when the system is bootstrapped, what do you mean by bootstrapped? Your operating system is getting loaded into your RAM. So when your operating system is getting loaded to a RAM, the kernel, the operating system will create a process ID. The first process which gets created when operating system gets loaded, that particular process is called as init process. That is the init process. So this init process will provide an opportunity for multi-user capability. That means multiple user can simultaneously log into the system. So when the system is getting bootstrap, or I can say when the operating system is getting loaded to your ROM, then it starts up a process called as init process. This init process provides the multi-user capability. That this init process will read a file, this particular file. This init process will read a file called as /etc/ttys, and for every terminal device that allows a login, so all the terminal login which will happen through this particular file, it will does a fork followed by exec of the program Getty. That means the init process will read this particular file. Inside this file, it contains many terminal device. So in order to boot up all those terminal device which allows a login, you need to create a fork. That means it does a fork followed by an exec of program Getty. So your init process will create a fork for each of the terminal. Then the Getty program, through that Getty program, you will call the exec function. So I hope you got some clarity. So what actually is happening? So when your system gets booted up, when your operating system gets loaded into ROM, your init process starts up. Your init process will read this particular file, which contains many number of terminals. Each terminal will provide a login name. For each of the terminal, through fork, a terminal gets created. Then init process gets created for each of the terminal. Then init program will call the exec of program Getty. Thereby your terminal starts to show up. So this can be shown in the below diagram. So when you understand the diagram, you will get a clear picture. So as you can see here, this particular diagram. So this is the starting process. So first time when the operating system gets loaded into ROM, your init process starts. Then it will fork. It will fork for each of the terminal which is found in that particular device. Then your init will call the exec function. Each child will exit the getty program. This is the time where your program will, where your terminal will be up and it will start running. So this can call many number of fork. As you can see, this can call many terminals. Each terminal will have a init process. That init will in turn call the exec function to load this getty program so that your terminal gets booted up. All the processes in figure 9.1, all these processes, that all the init processes will have an real user ID and effective user ID of 0. They all will have super user privileges. The init process also executes the getty program. So this is the process for each terminal. So each init process inside a terminal will execute the getty program with an empty environment. If getty, it is getty that calls upon for the terminal device. So this getty will make sure the terminal device gets started up. Then the terminal will be available for giving commands and getting outputs for reading and writing operation. Suppose if your terminal device is a modem, through phone you are getting connected to a terminal device, then you should wait for some amount of time in order to get connected. So once your terminal device is open, then the file descriptor will be set to that particular terminal device. So file descriptor 0 and 1 2 will be set to the terminal device. Then getty output something like login. So then once the terminal device is set up to all those respective file descriptor, then getty will display login name. So init executes getty, your getty program will display the login name and password for the user to enter. Once user enters the name, then getty's job is done. So then it will invoke the login program. So now we want to log into the terminal. So this is the login program which gets invoked. So it is present in this particular path. So for this particular username, so what is the login name we given for that particular username with this particular environment, it will start up your machine. So as you can see here, so this is the first time when your system gets loaded, booted up. So it creates an init process. It can fork for many number of terminals. It can create many init process. Then your init will call the exec function to start up the getty. Then getty in turn will call exec to invoke the login program, where the user will give the login name and password, thereby setting up the terminal for that corresponding user. So the login name with that corresponding environment, it will get set up. So all these processes which will have the super user privileges, because your init process adds super user privilege, thereby all the child processes will also have the super user privilege. So if we log in correctly, we will go to the home directory. So change the ownership power for terminal device, and also through which terminal device we are logged in, we will go to that particular terminal device, and also that particular user will obtain the ownership of the terminal device. So access permission of for our terminal device. So the access permission of the terminal device will also be changed. So we have read and write permission for the terminal device. All the group ID and user ID will be set. Then it will also set some environment variables, which is home, shell, user, log name, path. Path contains all the paths which are needed for commands to get for direct command. If you want to execute the command directly, then all those commands path should be found in this particular variable. Then you can execute those paths directly. Then you will be changing the shell. The login shell will be chained, as you can see here. So this is the login. In this particular path, the shell will be containing, the shell will the shell, which type of or what shell you are getting executed, that shell will be stored in this particular path. So that start opening. So as you can see, the minus sign as the first character of argument O is a flag to all the shells that they are being invoked as a login shell. So there are many different types of shells. So the corresponding shells is getting started up here. So to show that that corresponding shell is getting started up, we are showing it with the help of minus symbol. So this indicates all other shells that this particular shell is getting started up. The shells can look at this character and modify their startup accordingly. So other shells can look this particular shell which is currently running, so that they can wait until some other user will start their shells. So what all we learned in this particular process relationship, we saw how when a system gets booted up, a init process gets created. For each of the terminals, it will fork and create many number of init process. Your init will in turn call exit to call the getty program. Your getty will in turn call the login program to obtain the login credentials from the user. Then the user will start interacting with the terminal by setting many different parameters. So in this particular session, we covered three major topics. So already in our previous class, we had covered how we can change the user ID and group ID. There were many different functions available, and those functions were working differently for normal user and for super user. For normal user is the user who is having no privileges. That means he will be restricted to access some of the resources. Then we saw what is interpreter file. Later on we saw process accounting. That means when a process gets terminated, we can maintain a record for each of the process which gets terminated, which will have CPU time, the starting time of that particular process. There are many other parameters we can maintain with respect to a process. So later on we saw user identification, how we can obtain the login name of a particular user. The function we need to get login is the function we need to use to obtain the login name. Then we saw what are all the different times we can obtain with respect to a particular process: the wall clock time, the user CPU time, the system CPU time. Lastly, we saw how we can start up a terminal, what role your init and getty will have to play whenever an user has to interact with a terminal. So in our next presentation session, we can start with chapter 2 of module 4, which is inter-process communication. So how two processes can communicate with each other, what are all the various forms of inter-process communication that are supported by Unix operating systems. So let's try to cover all these topics, some of the topics or all of these topics, in our next coming presentation session. Thank you.